Hello everyone, this is Indie Pride. Welcome back. For those of you who have recently subscribed for Mortal Kombat X videos, thank you very much for watching and welcome to the channel. For the majority of you who are subscribed for Total War, again, thank you for being patient. I appreciate it. You probably noticed that in general, I haven't been uploading a whole lot. That is pretty natural. When you've been running a YouTube channel for 3 years, sometimes you just simply need a break. But needing a break from YouTube isn't the only reason I haven't been uploading Total War recently. In my opinion, at the moment, Total War Attila is incredibly dull and boring, for a variety of reasons, but the biggest is its bare-bones multiplayer. This video is going to be about the multiplayer offerings in Total War and how I think they could be improved, but the title kind of gives away the crux of my argument here. More on that in a bit. Currently, I feel like every high-level game on Attila revolves around basically the exact same strategy. Cavalry fights on the flanks, shock infantry in the middle covered by meat shields, and whoever wins the cavalry fight with cav left over is probably going to win the game, because they can just charge infantry over and over again with impunity until there's nothing left. It's an oversimplified version, of course, and it does take skill and good micromanagement to win, but my god is it boring to watch and commentate. What is there currently to commentate on that hasn't already been said a million times by me or other commentators? I appreciate the efforts of people like Heir of Carthage and others who are still commentating the game consistently, but do you really feel like they're giving you guys new information on strategies, or tactics, or fun things to do on multiplayer? There are no new strategies. Kiting is inefficient, if not downright impossible against high-level competition, and factions feel cut and pasted into maybe 4 different categories: Romans, Huns, Germans, and Nordics, and of course Assassins as well. But there's so much overlap between them that even the different categories generally kind of play the exact same. Not kind of, they do play the exact same. Multiplayer on Attila, as we speak, is dying if it's not already dead. And remember, the game only came out in February. It wasn't that long ago. Anyone who says it's not dying is either lying to themselves, misinformed, or just plain trolling. Yeah, there are a handful of troopers that are still playing the game. Yes, there are some decent mods out there that improve on the core multiplayer experience and make it more balanced and fun. But when you go into Battle List and there are maybe 5 games there, that doesn't say a whole lot. It doesn't speak very highly for where Attila multiplayer is right now. There were more games on Shogun 2 last night than there were on Attila. There were more games on Rome 2 last night than there were on Attila. And I don't even think Rome 2 multiplayer is a fantastic game. It's good, it's solid, but it's not amazing. So, that leads me to the main point of this video. What is multiplayer on Attila and Total War in general lacking? The answer, in my opinion, is replay value. And the solution to not having enough replay value in Total War multiplayer, in my opinion, is a fully fleshed out Avatar Conquest system with customization and progression, and full backing and support from Creative Assembly. Now, we all know that Total War Arena is coming, and perhaps that will fill the multiplayer void hardcore MP players have so desperately wanted for so long, but it is not the Total War we know and love. Even if it is a really fun game, I still have my doubts on whether it can be a true successor or improvement upon the Avatar system in Shogun 2. I think I speak for the majority of the multiplayer community when I say that we would prefer an actual Total War game to have a fleshed out multiplayer mode, as opposed to the standalone and free-to-play Total War Arena. Not that I don't want Total War Arena to succeed, because I absolutely want it to do brilliantly. I want it to do fantastic. But it is not the Total War we know and love. Now, Total War Warhammer has been announced, and I'll admit, even though I only know a little bit about Warhammer lore, because I never played the tabletop game, I'm very excited for it. It's a new direction for Total War. It's a new direction for the franchise. I think that it has limitless potential and could be just an absolutely gorgeous, amazing game. I'm really excited. A faction and unit variety, something that's desperately lacking in Attila, is guaranteed in Warhammer. You simply can't rehash or reskin units. It's not going to work. CA's going from, I believe, 5 base skeletons in Attila to something like 24 in Warhammer for the units, so actual unique gameplay and unit variety is all but assured. It could also be arguably the first Total War game where DLC is truly worth the price of admission, in that a faction like the Dark Elves or Skaven would look and play so completely differently than the Von Karstein Vampires or the Bretonnians. Completely new monsters, hero units, and hugely different gameplay mechanics for all these factions. And by the way, you know Sega is going to absolutely milk DLC off this franchise. But all those things could actually make DLC worth it in Total War Warhammer. But, unfortunately, I was looking through the Warhammer forums the other day and was very disappointed, although I can't say I was surprised, to see Maddie from CA confirm what I had already feared. And I quote, "As with previous Total War titles, Total War Warhammer will be primarily single-player focused. You can expect the same level of multiplayer features that Attila featured." Every time I see that quote, I just shake my head, because it is such a missed opportunity, especially in a franchise like Warhammer that was literally created exclusively for multiplayer. The tabletop game is multiplayer. It's all about creating your own unique army compositions and tailoring it and customizing it to your liking with your own colors and paint and weapons and spells. There is not a game in development on the planet that screams for the addition of Avatar Conquest like Total War Warhammer does. And yet CA and Sega are going to again forego the opportunity to add Avatar Conquest and release another bare-bones faction-on-faction multiplayer. The real slap in the face for me, and the multiplayer community in general, at least from my perspective, is that they haven't even bothered to add free-for-all to the list of game modes in Attila or Warhammer. Yes, they could add it to Warhammer, but we know they're not going to. That would require so very little effort in the scheme of an entire game's development. And it was in Rome 1 and Medieval 2. It was in games that came out 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. It's such a simple thing. And there have been so many forum posts about it. Prince of Mastodon made a video about adding free-for-all, and there has not been a single response from CA. Besides being lazy / not wanting to spend a teeny bit more money, what legitimate excuse is there for not adding free-for-all? Whatever. Let's move on. Why did I put 1,300 hours of my life into Shogun 2? What kept me coming back? Avatar Conquest. For me, it simply added so much replay value and just invested you in your armies, in your units, and in your progression. There are some of you that absolutely hated Avatar Conquest on Shogun 2, but there is no denying that Shogun 2's competitive multiplayer scene was the biggest and most successful and longest running in terms of clan and player participation in tournaments, and the sheer amount of people playing. So many players and clans have left the Total War scene entirely since Rome 2's release, and they really haven't been replaced. RTK is a great example of a veteran TW clan that is like 95% inactive now because of the bare bones direction multiplayer is headed, and they had been around for years before Shogun 2 was released. And they didn't play Rome 2 much, and they don't play Attila at all. I also have never seen the multiplayer forums as dead as they are now. On TotalWarForums.com, there are like 10 people who frequently post in the multiplayer forum of Attila. At release, it was hundreds, and in Shogun 2's heyday, it was pretty common for multiplayer threads to receive 5,000, 6,000 plus views and 100 to 200 different replies debating a single topic. None of that's happening on Attila's forums right now. They're basically dead. But, throwing that aside for a second, give me a moment now to try and shift your perspective if you're one of those people that hated Avatar Conquest. I'll be honest, it's always bothered me when I heard players say, "Oh my god, Shogun 2 Avatar system so unbalanced, so broken, so unfair, so much grinding," and use that as an excuse for why CA shouldn't implement it in future titles. Look, it's clear Avatar Conquest could have been implemented better, but are you honestly telling me that it couldn't have been improved going forward in a future Total War game? Do you honestly believe that stripping a unique and flavorful game mode is a better solution than actually balancing it? The vocal minority who cried about Avatar Conquest and Shogun 2 and said it was super unbalanced and just hated it so much actually held back Total War from evolving into something that could have been massive and improved the game tremendously in the long run, with some work on CA's part. And that is a big if. I mean, CA would have to commit to it. But in my mind, that vocal minority on the forums were a reason, if not a big reason, why CA didn't include it in titles after Shogun 2. And it's crazy. Let me remind you, classic battles were still in Shogun 2 and literally no one played them. In my lifetime on Battlelist, I saw only a handful of classic battle games being played outside of a few select tournaments. For those of you who don't know, classic battles are what are now in Rome 2 and in Rome 2 and Attila. Shogun 2 had a different game mode called Avatar Conquest. Classic battles were never played in Shogun 2 ever because everyone was in Avatar Conquest because it was the more exciting, more interesting game mode. And to be clear, I like classic battles. I think they're a great game mode, and in Shogun 2 they were ultra balanced, but it was not as exciting or interesting as Avatar Conquest. It was more balanced though. If that's the multiplayer everyone wanted though, if everyone wanted classic battles, why weren't they playing it? They were all playing Avatar instead, when given the option between the two. In and of itself, that says a lot about what the more entertaining game mode was. I will admit that there were some glaring balance issues in Avatar Conquest, but moving forward here, let's address those now, and we can have a discussion on how they could have been improved going forward. Some of these solutions I think could be easily implemented going forward into a new TW game, and some of them would require a lot more work on CA's part. The foundation, the groundwork, the actual Avatar mode would require a lot of work to get added into a new Total War game, and I know that's why CA hasn't done it yet, or done it again since Shogun 2. But well, let's just talk about some of the things that were a problem in Shogun 2 and how they could have been balanced going forward. Probably the biggest complaint on Avatar Conquest was the veteran system. It required a lot of grinding to level up a unit and acquire tokens that completely changed the capabilities and attack power of something like a Katana Samurai. This meant that someone with more playtime could theoretically have a big advantage over someone who didn't spend as much time on the game because their veterans were simply more powerful. I completely understand that complaint, and it is a valid one, to an extent. A great way to retain the veteran system but eliminate the grinding would have been to allow any unit that became a veteran after a battle to start out at max experience, meaning that the player could allocate upgrades to that unit however they saw fit immediately. Previously, you had to grind for a very long time to get them to level 9, and it meant that someone who had more time with the game would be able to have technically better units. The melee attack, defense, fear aura, extra range, all these upgrades could stay in the game, but everyone would be on the same playing field because anyone could upgrade their veterans however they wanted, whenever they wanted, immediately, without being limited by arbitrary tokens that could only be earned through grinding. The more upgrades you put in a unit, the more expensive it would become, just like in Shogun 2, so a meta would develop where a unit is vetted enough to make a big impact on the battle, but isn't so highly vetted and so expensive that the rest of the army suffers. Which is, by the way, exactly what happened on Shogun 2. There were so many people who complained about max level 9 unit spams, but the meta that developed in competitive Shogun 2 was level 2, level 3, level 4 veteran units that were simply more cost effective. For example, level 2 no-dachis with 2 points in melee attack were infinitely more common and cost effective than maxed out level 9 no-dachis. Unique maps would have to return. This point is beyond dispute, and if you truly believe that handcrafted maps are worse than the world-generated maps on Rome 2 and Attila, you're absolutely 100% crazy. The symmetry and variety of the maps on Shogun 2 made them ultra balanced, but because they were handcrafted, they had unique strategies and tactics and choke points and geographical features that could be utilized to turn the fight in your favor as well. It's not that there aren't a few maps on Rome 2 and Attila with these features, but in Shogun 2 almost every single map had these unique defining features, and these geographical characteristics on the map added another level of complexity and strategy. Crossroads, for example, a map on Shogun 2, had a huge set of ravines and hills running through the center of the map, which was perfect for rushing an opponent who had matchlock or range superiority, because the hills and ravines blocked their line of sight and they couldn't shoot you. Chikugo River, another map on Shogun 2, had 3 streams separated by islands, and movement was dramatically hindered crossing these streams. So someone who could control an island while an opponent attempted to cross to attack them would have a huge strategic advantage. Handcrafted maps add depth and complexity to multiplayer and would need to return if Avatar Conquest was to return. Retainers were the cards, the little cards that gave you troop unique buffs like increased melee attack for all sword infantry or faster movement speed for all cavalry. This system was another feature some people complained about. A lot of people complained about. There was a lot of crying about it, but I think balancing it perfectly would have been very easy. Maybe not perfectly, but balancing it would have been very easy. If every player got access to all retainers as soon as they booted up multiplayer, All grinding and random retainer drops would no longer be a problem. Again, these retainers would allow players to customize their army exactly the way they want it to be. For example, they could buff their ammo capacity and movement speed to make kiting and skirmish easier. Or a katana core kind of army could buff their attack damage and charge bonus to turn melee grinds in their favor. It would add more complexity and nuance without ruining balance because everyone would have access to the exact same retainers and could change their retainers depending on what kind of army they're bringing. Yes, some retainers would be better than others, but that really isn't a good argument to get rid of a feature. All fighting games, every fighting game in the history of fighting games, and MOBAs have tier lists too, where some characters are simply better than others, but giving players more choice is almost never a bad thing. Adding the retainer cards would again make multiplayer deeper and more nuanced, and I think that would be a very good thing. I think the actual upgrade system for generals in Avatar Conquest was beautifully designed, absolutely gorgeously done, and wouldn't need to get changed at all except maybe lowering the requirements for reaching max level so it doesn't take quite so long. In my opinion, a good multiplayer does need some feeling of progression and unlocks, so this would be a good one to still require experience for leveling up, but maybe just lower the thresholds for making it to a max out level. An often overlooked feature, but perhaps my favorite in Shogun 2, was the ability to customize your own faction banner and the colors of your units. This is such a simple thing, but being able to choose your own colors and banner makes your army feel like your own and feel unique. And that's a huge part of replay value. When you're invested in your own units, you want to play more. It's just human nature. I can still remember the unique faction mods of top players in Shogun 2 from like 3 or 4 years ago. I specifically remember Agony Ducks and Madnesses and my own and Boss Tycoons and other players. This kind of thing adds personalization, characterization to the multiplayer, makes it more fun, and it's cool to go into a battle and recognize someone's mod. This would fit so perfectly into Total War Warhammer, it actually blows my mind that it's not returning. The tabletop game is exactly like this. You paint your units how you want to paint them, and you make them your own, and it's not going to be in Warhammer, I don't think, and it just blows my mind. In general, though, CA, just across the board, could have eliminated the balance issues people complained about in Avatar Conquest by giving everyone access to most or all features and units from the start, or at least lower the threshold for leveling up a unit or general dramatically. So say, instead of it taking 30 battles to get a veteran unit to level 9, perhaps 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 battles to get them leveled up all the way. But I wouldn't even mind them eliminating the need for experience entirely. They could do that and it would still be fine. There are other features I could talk about, such as the absolutely amazing Fall of Samurai and unique challenge of facing an 1800s modernized weaponry with traditional samurai army, but I don't want this video to drag on too long. So, I'm going to leave this video with a couple more points for you to ponder. The biggest problem with Creative Assembly is the lack of competition they've had in their section of the market. From a business perspective, this has been absolutely great for CA and Sega. It's allowed them to kind of rest on their laurels and push out products that clearly weren't ready for launch, and allowed them to use the same TW3 engine for game after game after game, while still enjoying the profits that come with being the only true competitor in the unique niche of the strategy game genre. From the consumer's perspective, as many of you guys should know, lack of competition is very, very bad. It means that the monopoly, and make no mistake, CA is a monopoly because they're the only company that makes games like this. It means the monopoly can't be punished because consumers can't turn anywhere else for a better product. They can either play Total War or abandon the series, and people who love this game series but see it declining in some aspects aren't ready to leave the game series yet. I'm not ready to leave it yet. But CA has to start pushing the envelope and add features to their games, not strip them away, and they need to start catering to what was once a relatively large section of the community. Total War is not a single-player only game. I cannot stress that enough, and I see that so much on the forums. This attitude from single-player players that say, oh, I don't care if they add features to multiplayer. That doesn't benefit me. I don't play. I don't care. Like, Just because you don't play multiplayer doesn't mean that they shouldn't try to make every aspect of the game as good as they possibly can. And so when you use that kind of logic to say, oh, I don't care if you add stuff to multiplayer, that's such a bad thing to pass on to CA's heads. You shouldn't do that. Like, I get you don't play multiplayer, but don't ruin it for us. Don't say that. It's such a stupid thing to say. If you're going to add multiplayer, CA, don't half-ass it. Hire some more employees with all the koku or denari or talent you've earned from nickel and diming DLC over the last 2 games, and add some value with Avatar Conquest in Total War Warhammer. Hell, at this point I'd spend good money to get Avatar Conquest in Warhammer. And for those of you who think I'm just incessantly bashing on CA in this video, that clearly isn't my point. I wouldn't spend the time to create a video like this if I didn't want CA to succeed as a gaming company. I love their products. That's why we created a YouTube channel for their games. But it frustrates me when I look at Creative Assembly and feel as though they're ignoring the multiplayer community at large. There is so much untapped potential for a deep multiplayer experience, and hopefully they'll realize it and take the plunge again before the rest of the dwindling multiplayer community deserts them for good. Now, remember, this is an open forum for discussion. I fully expect some people to completely disagree with me, and that's fine. When you post in the comment section of this video, back up your arguments and discuss. The floor is yours.